I'm Jeroen, and today I'm going to present the Wikibase software to you. During previous SMWCons, there have been presentations on the Wikidata project, and there have been presentations on the difference between what you can do with the Wikibase software and with SMW, but this is the first presentation that's dedicated about the actual Wikibase software. So quickly, a few words about me. I've been maintainer and core developer of Semantic MediaWiki for the last few years, and I'm currently working for Wikimedia Deutschland on the Wikidata project as software architect. So in this presentation, I'll first cover the question, what actually is Wikibase? Because as we will see, it's not a MediaWiki extension, which is what some people might think. We'll be looking at the conceptual heart of the Wikibase software, which is its data model. Then we'll be looking at the two things that you will probably be familiar with if you've been following the Wikidata project, namely the Wikibase repository and the Wikibase client applications. Then at the end, we'll be looking at the components that make up the platform. And if there is time left, we'll do some questions. So what is Wikibase? It's an open source project which is being primarily contributed to by Wikimedia Deutschland to develop the Wikidata software. So it's not just a MediaWiki extension. It is, however, using the same technologies, the same languages. So it's primarily PHP and JavaScript. And it includes some MediaWiki extensions, but it also includes other components, most of which are not MediaWiki dependent, so they can be used in other contexts. So let's start with the data model. Items are the things representing subjects in Wikibase. So these are equivalent to wiki pages in SMW or to subobjects. And the whole data model itself is doesn't know about MediaWiki or it doesn't know about wikis. So these things cannot be identified by a title or a page title, like is the case in SMW for subjects, since it doesn't know about things such as pages. And these items are instead identified by an identifier, which always takes this form starting with Q and then a number. So that makes it easy for you to identify this as an item ID. Then the replacement for having things such as titles is what we're calling the fingerprint, in which you can specify a label for the item. And you can do this in different languages. So this is a list of 0 or more labels, 1 label per language. Now, since there are multiple things that can have the same name, so there are multiple cities, for instance, that are called Berlin, you often want to be able to differentiate between them further, for which we also have the fingerprint also contains a list of descriptions, 0 or more descriptions, again, 1 description per language. And the final part of the fingerprint is aliases, since you might want to refer to the same thing with multiple words. So for instance, if you have an item about New York City, then it might be called New York City, and obvious aliases there would be New York and NYC. So again, this is a list of 0 or more aliases, with the difference being here that you can have any number of aliases for one particular language. Items also contain what we're calling site links. And these are links to a particular page on some site that's about the same concept. So they indicate a kind of equivalency. And in the Wikidata case, this is used to replace the old interwiki link system and the things you see in the sidebar. But this is not specific to Wikipedia at all. So you could have links here and say, this article about this movie has an equivalent article on IMDb, for instance. Could I get some water? And the actual data is stored in what we're calling statements. And here there is quite some difference with SMW in the complexity of the data. So the core of statements is similar as in SMW. You just have a property value pair. So here it's saying the population is 3.5 million. And in the data model, we're calling these kind of property value pairs, we're calling them snacks. And what you're seeing here is the main snack of this particular statement. Now, the population was not always 3.5 million. It was 3.5 million at a specific time, and there are different ways you can measure population, and there are all these kind of things which you can use to qualify what this actually means, for which we have qualifiers. This is a list of 0 or more qualifiers. And so you can say that, for instance, the year was 2014 and that the method was estimation. And each of these qualifiers, again, is a snack. And we'll see later what exactly a snack is. On top of that, this system does not specify the truth. It specifies what was stated by a particular source. So you can also add sources, 0 or more sources, to a statement. And then the final thing that makes up a statement is its so-called rank. And you can basically say that it's a normal statement, you can say it's a preferred statement, or you can say that it's a deprecated statement, which of course doesn't make a lot of sense unless you realize that you can have more than one statement for a given property on the same item, which is the difference with SMW. So for instance, you can have one that's about 2012, but you can also perfectly well have another statement that says the population for 2014 with method estimation according to some other sources. And this nicely illustrates why you have the rank, because if you want to, for instance, extract information or run a query and you want to find the cities that had a population of 3.5 million or more at the moment, then you want this value to be used and you don't want this value to be used, which is what the rank is about. So there are 3 types of snacks. The first one we've already seen, which is the simple case where you say this particular property has that value. So for instance, population is 300,000, which is done with so-called value snacks. But suppose you're describing a person and you know this person is still alive, then you can say that the date of death for this person does not exist. And in this case, you use no value snack that says there is no value for this property. And very similarly, if you know the person is dead, but you just don't know when the person died, then you can say there is a value, so this person has died, but we don't know exactly when. And all of these, well, all snacks have a property ID. So what you're seeing here, you're seeing population once and you're seeing date of death twice. Internally in the model, these labels are not present. We're just referencing the properties with a property ID. And the same also goes for items. If we're referencing items, we will always use the ID and not use the label or any other part of the fingerprint. So this brings us to what makes up a property. This is pretty similar to items. They have an ID, which always starts with P. They also have a fingerprint, so you can describe in a more user-friendly way what it's actually about. They can have a list of statements. And then they have, like in SMW, each property has a given type. And also like SMW, there are various types. such as strings, quantities, arrays, items. That should be pretty familiar to you. So, Wikibase repository is the name of a MediaWiki extension, and this is the main application that makes up the Wikibase software. It's built on top of several other parts of the Wikibase software, which we will see later on. And the goal of Wikibase repository is to provide you with an entity base. So this is where you actually store your various items and your various properties. And this is the thing that's running on wikidata.org. So this extension for each item adds a wiki page. So like in SMW, you have a wiki page per subject, but and this gives you integration with the MediaWiki installation and all the features it provides. So for instance, you can the items are revisioned. You can view old versions. You can view the diffs between the various items. And you can watch items. You can see which ones change. You can use things such as recent changes. You can use discussion pages. All the functionality you expect in normal MediaWiki installation. Now, a big difference with SMW here is that you can only edit this via a graphical user interface. So there is no wiki text involved here at all in defining this, which was important, of course, for getting this in on Wikipedia and so on, because it needs to be very user-friendly. And on top of having this interface, you cannot put anything else in this wiki page. This wiki page can just contain the item. So you cannot say, oh, I will also add this other text there. That's not possible. And internally, this data is represented as JSON. And you can get to this data via the API. So you can fetch an entire item, including information about the page it resides in. And this extension also adds a number of other API modules where you can edit items, you can figure out what the page on a particular site is for an item, you can do automatic disambiguation based on terms, so you can say, I'm interested in the thing that's called Berlin, and then it can show you all the things that have a label Berlin or an alias Berlin. And in these API modules, there are modules that allow you to modify an entire item in one go, and there are modules that allow you to modify specific parts of the item. So on the different Wikipedias, we've deployed the extension, the MediaWiki extension Wikibase client. And like Wikibase repository, this is built on the other components, which we will see later. And the main goal of this extension is to embed the data that's stored by a Wikibase repository into wiki pages. So this is an example of something used at the moment on Wikipedia. And the part that's coming from Wikibase client is here, this property parser function that allows you to retrieve the value for this property for the item that has the equivalence link to the article this is embedded in. And we also have Lua bindings, so if you don't want to mess with the parser functions, you can use Lua. Then the equivalently links, like I said, they are used to replace the old inter-wiki link system. So now if you go to Wikipedia, the information at the left hand of the article that points to other Wikipedias with the same article is coming from the repository and using these site link information. It's also possible on clients to get notified of changes that occurred to items on Wikidata, because you're probably interested in this. If you're pulling in the data, you want to know if the source changed. So that's an example here where you're getting notified of this. And this is very awesome. Somebody improved cats. I definitely approve of that. So you might be wondering now if you can use this MediaWiki extension, so Wikibase client, if you can use this on your own wiki to pull in information from Wikidata or from some other Wikibase repository instance. And the answer there is, at the moment, unfortunately, probably not, since the only replication mechanism we have at the moment requires local database access. So as a third-party user, you can, at the moment, not use Wikibase client to get information from Wikidata. But if you yourself want to set up a Wikibase repository and some clients, you can do this as long as the repository and the clients can talk to each other's databases. Also, some further note here on third-party readiness. At the moment, the extensions I've just presented are really geared towards usage by the Wikimedia Foundation, because in the end, that's what they're developed for. And in my personal opinion, they're not ready at all for serious third-party usage. For instance, this critical replication mechanism thing is missing. And we also don't yet have stable releases. And we're making breaking changes without really logging these and without providing guides on how users can migrate. So if you want to play around with this, that's definitely possible. And we definitely welcome this, to try this out. But I would not recommend trying to build an entire project on top of these two extensions yet at the moment. Since they might not be ready yet for you in time. So Wikibase client is just one of the things built on top of the platform, and here are just some screenshots of pretty nice tools that are built around the Wikidata project, and so around the data it contains. So these are just some examples of what you could do. And when you want to create something around a Wikibase instance, or you want to work with the same data, then it's very useful if you can already represent the data and if you can already talk to the API and interpret the data you're getting from it. And that's where the components come in. So to give you a quick overview, we have various applications in the Wikibase software, which are built on domain-specific components. So we have a component that has objects in it that describe the domain model we have. So it has value objects for items, for snacks, for all these things. And it encodes restrictions such as that you cannot have duplicate aliases in a list of aliases, or that references cannot be empty. Then we have this data model serialization component, which allows you to take the output of our API, so the JSON output, for instance, and feed it to this component, and it will spit out the value objects defined by the data model component. So you don't need to write your own deserializers, and you can very easily avoid having, hard coding how the serialization structure looks. And this is basically entirely solved for you. And if some parts of the API would change, then you would also be protected from that change, since it would be updated there. And we also, the software also includes a number of domain agnostic components. For instance, we have a library for diffing data structures, and we have a set of libraries for representing very basic values. And As you go down here, down the slides, reusability goes up. So these are things you can basically use in a context that's completely unrelated to the Wikibase software. And these are things that, at least if you're writing PHP, will very likely be useful to you, even if you're not working with MediaWiki, since these things don't use MediaWiki. So you could, well, if you're building a tool for embedding information from a Wikibase source in some forum or in some blog, then that's very helpful for you to have. We also have a website about the software, which is wikibase.se. And on this website, we have a list of our different components, together with some short description and a link to the relevant Git repositories, which will have more detailed instructions on how you can install them, how you can contribute to them, and yeah. So from the components that we have, the most interesting ones for the people here, I think, are the data model, which I already mentioned, so objects for representing the data. This serialization component for deserializing information you are getting via the API, or for serializing it to send information to the API. We also have a component which is called Wikibase Query Engine, which is very much inspired by SQL Store 3 of SMW. It's doing something very similar, but then for data in the Wikibase data model. And since it's so similar, we're, at least I'm looking into how we can share code such as this component in the future with the SMW project. Much in line with this is the Ask library, which is a re-implementation of the Ask language as defined in SMW. And the difference here being that this is a standalone PHP library, which you can use, loose from MediaWiki, loose from SMW, and loose from Wikibase. And we also have a serialization library for this, so you can translate the objects into some JSON or some XML and allow people to, for instance, specify a whole query via some API module without using Wikitext syntax for this. So again, the website for the Wikibase project is wikibase.se, and you can also find the slides on bit.ly/wikibase-smwcon. Are there any questions?
My question would be, how do you see the relation of the whole Wikidata approach with Wikipedia? Will it replace it? Will it be parallel? What is your opinion on that?
My opinion on this is that I really don't want to go into this topic, especially not on tape. Since this is a kind of controversial topic, as you can imagine, and I've not recently looked into it, so I'm not really the best person to ask either. I think you're better off asking this on the Wikidata mailing list.
Any further questions?
The IDs of the entities in the Wikidata repository in the database, do you recommend to use them for external projects? Will they be stable for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, they ought to be stable. You have full IRIs. If you're referring to them, you can use wikidata.org/entity/q123, for instance. And yeah, it's possible we delete something or that the community deletes something, and it's possible something gets moved, but then there will be a redirect.
Thank
Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, and recently we had a question on the mailing list about somebody that wanted stable links to Wikipedia. So they wanted to link this particular concept on Wikipedia, but they would not want the links to break if the title of the page would change. And one thing you can then do is also use the resolving of the links on wikidata.org. So then you have a URL that says, I want to link to EN Wikipedia for this particular ID.
More questions? Probably if everything has settled, then there will be more questions, I guess. Thank you very much.